please rise for the arrival of the official party? Please be seated. Good evening, Brigade and distinguished guests. Tonight, it is my honor to introduce our Forrestal speaker, Senator John McCain. The son and grandson of distinguished Navy admirals, Senator McCain graduated from United States Naval Academy in 1958 and began a 22-year career as a naval aviator. In 1967, while serving aboard the USS Forrestal, he was at the epicenter of the tragic fire that ravaged the ship. He escaped from his burning jet and was wounded by the explosion of a 1,000-pound bomb while attempting to rescue a fellow pilot. Later that year, he was shot down over Vietnam and held as a prisoner of war in Hanoi for 5.5 years, much of it in solitary confinement. He retired from the Navy as a captain in 1981. First elected to represent the state of Arizona in the U.S. House of Representatives in 1982, he served 2 terms in the House before being elected to the Senate in 1985. He was overwhelmingly re-elected to a 5th Senate term in November 2010. Senator McCain has served as a distinguished member of the Naval Academy Board of Visitors for more than 23 years. Please join me in welcoming back to the Naval Academy Senator John McCain, class of 1958.
Thanks very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for that warm welcome, and it's always a pleasure to return to Annapolis, or as some of my classmates often refer to the Naval Academy during my years as a midshipman, the scene of the crime. I've had the privilege of delivering the Forrestal Lecture before, and I'm well aware of the many distinguished speakers who have shared that privilege with me. I'm humbled to be in their company, but I can claim a distinction I doubt that any of them possess. I'm pretty sure I'm the only speaker who graduated from the Academy 5th from the bottom of my class. And I'm positive I'm the only one who would admit it. However, I'm not going to regale you with stories about how I managed that dubious accomplishment. They're hardly an example I would recommend to you. And I only recall them because I like to remind myself from time to time that I wasn't always as old as I am now or as concerned about my public reputation. Instead, out of respect for you in this distinguished forum, I thought I'd talk about something more relevant to you, something I began to learn here, even if I didn't realize it at the time, and which I came to appreciate more as a Navy officer and a public office holder: leadership. I want to discuss first the quality of leadership in our military, and then in the conduct of American foreign policy. The latter is not the responsibility of officers in the armed services, but it certainly is affected by how well you do your job. I can trace my family's military history to the American Revolution, when an ancestor served on General Washington's staff. McCains have served in every war in our nation's history, most of them in the Army, until my grandfather had the good sense to break with family tradition and seek an appointment to Annapolis. In 1936, the oldest aviator in the United States Navy received his wings at Pensacola Naval Air Station. He was a 52-year-old captain who had received his commission 30 years earlier. He wasn't a very good flyer then, nor would he ever be. He was reported to have cracked up 5 planes during his pilot training, and a subordinate once remarked that, quote, the base prayed for his safe return every time he flew. But for the remainder of his Navy career and his life, naval aviation was my grandfather's greatest passion, and his contributions to its emergence as an essential and at times decisive element of American military power was his greatest accomplishment. My father wanted to fly too, but he couldn't pass the physical and became a submariner and eventually Commander-in-Chief of U.S. forces in the Pacific. Two of my sons earned their wings at Pensacola, and my youngest son, Jimmy, enlisted in the Marine Corps out of high school and served in Iraq. So when I speak about leadership in our armed forces, I'm more than a little familiar with the subject. I was raised in the Navy. I've been around military officers all my life. For most of half a century, the Navy was the only world I really knew. I've been privileged to witness examples of courageous, inspiring leadership in the most difficult of circumstances. I know what it is, and I know what it isn't. One of the benefits of living as long as I have is that you get to see a lot of history in the making. And if you're paying attention, you can learn the lessons of what we did right and what we did wrong. Both should be carefully studied. In a little over 2 months, we'll commemorate the 70th anniversary of the Battle of Midway, when barely 6 months after the attack on Pearl Harbor, we faced an enemy supremely confident in their ability not just to defeat, but to annihilate the battered remnants of Halsey's Pacific Fleet. We were overwhelmingly outnumbered and outgunned. The Japanese brought 8 carriers, we had badly 3. They had 11 battleships, we had none. And the Japanese had the best fighter aircraft in the Pacific, the Mitsubishi Zero, that easily dominated the slower, less agile TBDs, SBDs, F-4Fs, and Marine F-2As. Making matters worse, our forces were plagued by faulty equipment. The Mark 13 torpedo was notoriously unreliable. In fact, not a single torpedo dropped at Midway by Torpedo 3, Torpedo 6, or Torpedo 8 even detonated. And the new electrical arming system on the SBDs had the annoying habit of randomly releasing the bomb when the master arms switch was selected. But in the end, the battle turned not on numbers or equipment, but rather on the actions and the leadership of some truly extraordinary men. What they did at Midway has become the stuff of legend. Men like Lieutenant Commander John Waldron, skipper of Torpedo 8, who led his 15 TBD Devastators against one of the enemy carriers at wave-top height and barely 100 knots while trying to fend off the far more capable and deadlier Zeros. With no fighter cover of his own, Waldron's fate was sealed. His last transmission to his squadron mates was simple: we will go in, we won't turn back, we will attack. Good luck. And men like Marine Major Joe Henderson, who led his mixed squadron of F-4Fs and F-2As against the carrier Hiryu, struck by anti-aircraft fire, his aircraft in flames. Henderson pressed the attack on what would be his last flight. And Lieutenant Commander Wade McCluskey, who despite being dangerously low on fuel, kept searching for the Japanese carriers until he found them, and whose extraordinary leadership, according to Admiral Nimitz, quote, decided the fate of our carrier task force and our forces at Midway. The Battle of Midway was won not by superior equipment, and certainly not because we outnumbered the Japanese. We won because of the stout hearts and uncommon leadership that for 100 years has been the hallmark of the U.S. Navy and Marine Corps. My grandfather commanded a carrier task force in the Pacific during World War II. He made it a point to talk with pilots after they returned from a strike, asking them, quote, do you think we're doing the right thing? He knew that if you ever stopped learning from your men, then you stopped leading. Today we hear a lot about management and not nearly enough about leadership. That worries me. One thing of which I am certain, there's a great difference between managers and leaders. Competent managers are useful in any endeavor, but they are plentiful. Our nation graduates over 150,000 MBAs every year, but leaders, true leaders, are rare, and they are far more important assets than managers. Leaders inspire people. Managers, well, they manage people and assets. Leaders think about protecting and promoting their people. Leaders take charge and accept responsibilities. Managers often turn to a higher authority for fear of making a wrong decision. Leaders take risks when necessary. Managers are taught to avoid risks whenever possible. Halsey, Nimitz, and Spruance were leaders. Henderson, McCluskey, and Waldron were leaders. If any one of them had opted for caution rather than courage, when their moment of testing came, we would have lost the Battle of Midway. In recent years, I worry we've allowed ourselves to concentrate too much on producing competent managers rather than the next generation of leaders. I worry we've focused so much on strategy and tactics that we spend too little time developing the leadership skills of those who really decide the outcome of battles. My father used to say that technical experts are a dime a dozen. You can always find a man who can tell you how many foot-pounds of force are in a piston or what the aerodynamic effects on a plane will be at certain airspeed and altitude. But he said, the business of leadership is another matter entirely. It's one of the most difficult subjects there is, to inspire in people subordinate to you and desire to do a better job. That's where leadership trumps management, in the art of inspiring others to perform far beyond their self-imposed limits. Few managers, however competent, will ever inspire people to endure the hardships and make the sacrifices that are the price we pay for the privilege of defending our great nation. Please don't mistake me. Our armed forces will need competent managers and a lot of technical expertise as we face the challenges to our security in this rapidly changing world. And I know quite a few inspiring leaders who serve in uniform today. I just want to encourage the understanding that our armed forces are first and foremost in the business of leadership. I encourage everyone here who will have the privilege to defend our country and its interest in the 21st century to study the example of our military leaders in the last century. Study their lives and their leadership styles and strive to be like them. Learn to inspire the men and women who will serve under you. Encourage them. Give them meaningful responsibility. Allow them room to grow, to make mistakes, and to learn from them. Be slow to judge. And remember that many of our most revered leaders would never have survived in a one-strike or zero-defect environment. Not only our nation, but the world has a lot riding on your judgment and leadership. These are fascinating times we live in, as the United States confronts challenges very different from the challenges of the last century. My generation served America's interest in the Cold War, a dangerous but comparatively stable time when the world was divided between East and West, and few doubted the necessity and ability of American leadership. Today, the world isn't bipolar, nor, thankfully, is it maintained by the threat of mutually assured destruction. But it is more complicated and changes rapidly thanks to the revolutionary technological advances that will define the age. It sometimes seems like there really isn't any order in world affairs, but there is. And contrary to assertions that American power and influence is declining irreversibly, it is an order shaped by American values, interests, and leadership. and we will continue to lead it as long as we have the will to do so. For all the challenges we face, for all the changes occurring in the world, I am convinced that America still has the greatest capacity to lead the world, that most of the world wants us to lead, and that it is necessary for our future and the future of humanity that we lead. Globalization, the spectacular economic growth of China and India, Brazil, and others, China's growing political and military assertiveness, competition for energy resources, the financial crisis of 2008, and deep recession and weak recovery that followed, our mounting national debt, two long and difficult wars, are often cited, among other reasons, as contributing factors in America's diminished capacity for world leadership. But for all our problems, we still stand the best chance of not just surviving global changes, but using them to advance our progress and strengthen our position in the world. The rise of new economic powers, China, India, Brazil, and others, doesn't have to come at the cost of our opportunities and influence in the world. We are still the most innovative country in the world, and likely to remain so for the foreseeable future. Future technological advances will affect our fortunes and the world's as profoundly as did the revolution in communications technology, most of which was invented here. Our economy is still the largest in the world. And as Robert Kagan has pointed out, even if in 20 years or so that China has a larger economy than ours, our relative economic strength will still be greater because our per capita GDP will be higher. No other market is freer than ours. Our standard of living is still the highest. Our universities are still considered the world's finest. The changes that have enabled countries to generate greater economic growth today than in the United States are changes that have mostly embraced American economic values. And the greatest political changes occurring in the world today are consistent with American political values. Name another economic philosophy that is as widely adopted as free market capitalism. Name another political philosophy that is gaining as many adherents in the nations of the world as Western liberalism. You can't. Communism, fascism, socialism, all the isms that have seriously challenged the ideals of free peoples and free markets have come and mostly gone. And when has the rising prosperity of other nations ever presented more of a disadvantage than an opportunity for us? Our military power, despite the burden of 2 long wars and the constraints our budget deficits and national debt impose, remains vastly superior to the militaries of all other nations. To quote Robert Kagan again, the U.S. is far and away the most powerful nation the world has ever known, and there has been no decline in America's relative military capacity, at least not yet. We spend less on defense spending as a percentage of GDP than we did in the 1950s and the 1980s, but we still have the most advanced, experienced, and capable military in the world. We obviously have a greater capacity to influence the international system than any other country. But does the world still want us to lead? Yes, yes, yes. I travel a lot at the expense of the American taxpayer, and everywhere I go, Europe, the Middle East, Asia, I hear again and again from government, military, and business leaders and from ordinary people struggling to gain the freedoms and opportunities that Americans believe are their birthright, that American leadership is indispensable to their interests and to the stability and prosperity of the world. I've never heard anyone welcome the idea that China or any other power should replace America's influence in the world. I've spoken with many people risking their lives to bring an end to autocracy and institute government by the consent of the governed in the various movements that comprise the Arab Spring. Their message is always the same. Yes, we want America's help, but not just when it's safe, but when we need it most, as the old regimes fight desperately to hang on to power. They want to know that we act not only in our self-interest. That's why I'm so concerned that the U.S. is failing to exercise leadership in Syria. Clearly, our interests and values would be significantly advanced should the Syrian people bring an end to the Assad regime. Should the regime fall, it would be a body blow to the regional influence of our most dangerous adversary in the Middle East, Iran. Assad Syria is Iran's only ally in the Middle East and provides vital support to Hezbollah and Hamas. It's murdering its citizens by the thousands. We must act urgently to support Syrian opposition with deeds as well as words to counter the support Assad receives from Iran and Russia. Soon, it might be too late to help. It is by no means a given that the success of the Arab Spring will result over time in stable democracies governed by the rule of law that protects fundamental human rights for all. A more stable, less violent Middle East. Islamic extremists might hijack revolutions that were fought to achieve basic human rights and political self-determination. The United States can influence their direction, but our influence will be directly related to the extent of our support for opposition movements in their hour of need, and not just in the wake of their success. This brings me to my final point, the necessity of American leadership. This world poses many challenges, but it offers even more opportunities. We can thrive in a global economic order of rapidly emerging and competing economic powers as long as we exercise the leadership to establish its rules and change our own practices that undermine the productivity and competitiveness of our economy. We can enhance our own security and increase our influence by maintaining our military superiority and by supporting the aspirations to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness of oppressed peoples in whatever region of the world they happen to live. The rumors of our decline can be proven premature if we have the will, the fortitude, and confidence to do in this century what we did in the last. Help make this world another better place than we found it. We will only fail if we give up and become the first American generation to accept our destiny rather than make it. That would be a tragic fate, not only for us, but for the progress of the human race. These are your challenges and opportunities more than they are mine. I'm nearing the end of a long career in our country's service. You will soon begin yours. I envy you and trust you will make the most of your opportunity. You better. The whole world is counting on you.
Sir, midshipman third class Chief Foreign Exchange student from the Republic of Panama. Sir, you were born on American soil in the Panama Canal Zone. What do you think about Americans who were born outside USA territory and could not become presidents of this country?
I think it's part of our Constitution, and I might point out that my predecessor in the United States Senate was a guy named Barry Goldwater, who also ran for president and also lost. By the way, after I lost, I slept like a baby. Sleep 2 hours, wake up and cry. Sleep 2 hours, wake up and cry. Let me ask your sympathy for the families of the state of Arizona, because this guy Barry Goldwater in 1964 ran for president and lost. We had a guy named Morris Udall who ran for president and lost. We had a guy named Bruce Babbitt from Arizona. He ran for president. I, from Arizona, ran for president of the United States. Arizona may be the only state in America where mothers don't tell their children that someday they can grow up and be president of the United States. Anyway, Barry Goldwater was born in Arizona when it was still a territory, and when he won the Republican nomination for president, it went all the way to the United States Supreme Court, and the United States Supreme Court ruled that if you were born in a territory of the United States, you qualified then as citizen according to our Constitution. It may be a bit unfair, but frankly, I don't see it as changing much. Probably won't change. And by the way, I'm proud of my heritage of having been born in Panama, and I visit it regularly. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
So,
Sir Midshipman First Class Ian Cameron, what specific actions do you propose that the United States take to support the Syrian opposition?
Thank you for the question. Americans are war weary. They're weary because we've been in 2 wars. We've sacrificed a lot of American blood and treasure over the last decade. But there are people in Syria today who are dying as we speak, people your age, and they are fighting for freedom from a despotic dictator whose father was equally as barbaric as he is. Now close to 10,000 people have been killed in Syria, children maimed, people tortured, women raped. It's a horrible story. And what I and Senator Joe Lieberman and Senator Lindsey Graham and some others have advocated is that we not put any American boots on the ground, that we not act unilaterally, but we join with other countries and establish a sanctuary where the people who are in the resistance can organize, treat wounded, train, equip, and then also it will require foreign air power, and then have a chance for freedom. And those who oppose it, and you'll read about it every day, are the same ones that said we couldn't succeed in Libya. They're the same ones that said in Bosnia we shouldn't go in when ethnic cleansing was going on. They're the same ones that said we shouldn't go to Kosovo when the Albanian population there was being ethnically cleansed. And every time we've been able to do it if we had the national will to do it. I'm not going to give you too long an answer, but we should. When the massacre and genocide took place in Rwanda, all of us said, oh, we wish we had stopped it. Well, I don't want some time from now when all the gory details come out about Syria for us to say that we didn't do anything about it. And finally, could I just tell you a brief story. I was in Benghazi in Libya when the fighting was going on in Misrata. And I met with then Transition National Council. I went to the hospital in Benghazi. A ship had just come in from Misrata loaded with wounded young people. And I went to the hospital, and the doctors there took me around as I watched a lot of young people dying from various wounds and various terrible things that had been inflicted on them. I'm sure that you are aware that the first hour after being wounded in combat, they call the golden hour. That's when you can have the best opportunity to save someone's life. They'd been on that ship for 12 hours. I watched them dying before my eyes, and they were dying for the same things that we fought for a long time ago. As we speak today, there are young Syrians who are fighting and dying and being slaughtered by artillery and tanks that are supplied by the Russians and are supplied by the Iranians, including Iranians on the ground. It's not a fair fight. And I think that they should get our assistance, and it does not mean American boots on the ground. And by the way, General Mattis, who I understand spoke to the brigade here, testified before our committee that if Syria fell, if Assad fell, it would be the greatest blow to Iran that they've had in 25 years, because it would free up Lebanon. It would cut off Iran from Hamas and Hezbollah, the terrorist organizations, and would have a profound effect on the Iranian influence in the region. So there is an additional national security interest there. I'm sorry for the long answer, but some of us believe that we should come to the assistance of these people who are fighting and dying for freedom, and we are seeking presidential leadership, which right now is nowhere to be seen.
Sir, Midshipman, Third Class Chin, 17th Company. My question is...
That's a great company.
I have to agree, sir. Recently, the United States was seen scoring lower than several other countries in international tests on education levels. My question for you, sir, is based on your experience in Congress, what initiatives are being passed to improve education in the United States, specifically STEM education, and what is your opinion of the education system in the United States?
I think in some respects, when you look at our universities and our highest level institutions, that they're still the best in the world. That's why you see people from all over the world attending these institutions. There's no doubt at the highest level that they're still the best in the world. But as we all have acknowledged and recognized for many years, that there are certain aspects of education in America which are badly lacking, or we're badly needed, and we are not preparing young people to enter the workforce, particularly in this area of our economy being driven by technology, and we need to do a lot better. And what are we doing to fix it? Not much. In the New York school system, they had a guy named Joel Klein who really did a lot of good work there. In Washington, D.C., there was a woman named Michelle Rhee who was really a reformer, and there is some progress. But you are right, the test scores are poor, and we are going to have more and more people not qualified to enter the workforce unless we make significant changes. One area that a lot of us have supported for a long time is choice. And we think that parents ought to have choice. President Obama made the choice, and I respect it, to send his daughters to the best private school in Washington, D.C., not the public schools in Washington, D.C. I think that we should support charter schools. Charter schools are good, charter schools are bad. Good ones thrive, bad ones fail. And we also have to make sure that we someday reward good teachers and help bad teachers find another line of work. And that's not the case today.
Sir, Midshipman, Third Class Hoffman, 27th Company. Sir, my question for
Bad
you...
company. I apologize.
Sir, my question for you is this. With global change becoming ever greater, there is debate as to whether the U.S. Constitution, the way it is written now, is sufficient enough to cover the change. Do you think we should rewrite the Constitution to better accommodate the changes?
No.
Sir, Midshipman, Second Class Azelton, do you believe that our nation's technological innovations will result in the degradation of our nation's leadership?
No. I think, look, that one of the greatness and strength of America is obviously our technological capabilities. Apple wasn't, your iPhone was not invented in China. Facebook was invented here. All of the new technological advances that have allowed people to communicate in the most incredible fashion, and it's not all good, but have been incredible. The Arab Spring may have happened, but it wouldn't have happened the way that it did if it had not been for communications capabilities we have today, whether it be Facebook or Twitter or whatever. I was in Egypt with the young people that made the revolution in Egypt. The young man pulled out his BlackBerry and said, I can get 200,000 people in the square in 3 hours. I was with a group of young people who made the revolution in Tunisia, and a young woman stood up at this group of them who had made the revolution and said, Senator McCain, you know who our national hero is? And I said, no, who is? She said, Mark Zuckerberg. You think about that. You think about that. It's remarkable. And their ability to communicate and to organize is something that cannot be completely stopped. The Chinese are doing their best to prevent it, but it is not possible. And I would like to say, point out that there will be more ways of communicating with one another. I was trying to think of one more example of what I was saying. Oh, I want you to remember something here. There was a young man in Tunisia. He was a college graduate, and he couldn't get a job, and he was selling vegetables. And the police came, and they took his vegetables, and he complained about it, and they beat him up in front of all the other people, humiliated him. So he poured gasoline on himself, and he set himself on fire. And that started the Arab Spring. And Ben Ali in Tunisia was thrown out. In Egypt, Mubarak was thrown out. In Libya, after a hell of a struggle, Gaddafi left. I am convinced, and I pray every night, that Assad will leave. But it's not just confined to the Middle East. In Russia, we've had thousands and thousands of people demonstrate against the corrupt Putin government. There have been efforts in China even to communicate with one another and to assert their God-given rights. It's all over the world, and the world is changing before our very eyes. But they still look to the United States of America as their inspiration and their model. They want to be like us, but they also want us to assist them. Not to dictate to them, but to assist them.
Senator, Midshipman Second Class Knutson, Third Company. At the recent American and Israeli Public Affairs Conference in Washington, D.C., Senator Mitch McConnell called for a direct military action if Iranian uranium enrichment levels were above weapon mass destruction grade. My question for you is, do you see direct military action taking place in Iran? Or in other words, do you see war imminent with that country? And if you do you agree or disagree with that?
I think that the sanctions, and they have been very severe, that have been imposed on Iran has had a significant effect. If you look at the value of their currency, it has plummeted by some 30 or 40%. Their banks are now having difficulty, in fact, are prohibited, the central bank, from doing any financial business with anybody that does business with American banks. And we are squeezing them, and that's the good news. The bad news is there is no evidence whatsoever that they have deviated from their path of acquiring a nuclear weapon. The President of the United States has said that it is, quote, unacceptable for the Iranians to have a nuclear weapon. The question is, at what point is it that we are convinced that the Iranians have acquired this capability? And by the way, don't forget that it is their stated goal to, quote, wipe Israel off the map. Put yourself in Prime Minister Netanyahu's position. When the country is dedicated to wiping you off the map, and they are developing the capability to do so. So this has caused a kind of a space, and it shouldn't have, but it's caused space between the United States and Israel, because the United States wants Israel to wait till the last moment to, if they need to respond to this Iranian threat, when it will have exceeded Israeli military capabilities. Put yourself in Netanyahu's shoes. Suppose the United States of America had a country in our hemisphere that was developing nuclear weapons that said they were going to wipe us off the map, would we depend on Israel to bail us out? That's the challenge that Prime Minister Netanyahu and the Israelis have. I don't know if we will have to use military capability or military action, but I do agree with the President of the United States, and this is Democrat and Republican across the spectrum, that it is an unacceptable situation for the Iranians to have a nuclear weapon. By the way, when they do, every country in the region will have nuclear weapons. The threat of a nuclear weapon falling into the hands of a terrorist organization like Hamas or Hezbollah is dramatically increased. And by the way, the Iranians can close the Straits of Hormuz, but they can't close it for long thanks to the capabilities of the United States Navy. But it would drive the price of oil up rather dramatically higher than it is today, and the ramifications of it are, like most wars, very, very hard to predict. But I do know what will happen if they have the nuclear weapon. I take them at their word that they want to, quote, wipe Israel off the map. That will present a President of the United States with some very, very difficult decisions.
Good evening, sir. Midshipman, third class Boyd, First Company. My question refers to your foreign policy, sir. In relation to the current economic situation in Greece, as the United States, what can we do to prevent such economic and political collapse?
I think what the Europeans primarily are doing to help bail out the Greek basket case economy is probably the right thing to do. I think we have to understand, and there's a book called Reckless Endangerment by a woman named Gretchen Morgenstern, who is a writer for the New York Times. Not my favorite publication, but you really have to understand how this global financial collapse happened. The greatest financial disaster since the Great Depression in this country, and the ripple effects that it had that literally reverberated throughout the globe. I think the Greeks may stumble along and make it over time. I think that Spain is in trouble. I think there's no doubt that in most experts' mind that Europe will go into a recession in the next couple of years. That's bound to affect the United States economy. The Chinese have some very fundamental economic problems, and that has a lot to do with corruption and a growing, and an aging population, by the way, because they institute a one family, one child restriction on the Chinese people for a long period of time. So I think that the economy will probably improve slowly in Greece, and I think it'll probably improve slowly here, and I think that's good news that it is beginning to improve. But like in my home state of Arizona, we still have nearly half of the homes are, quote, underwater. That means it's worth less than the mortgage payments that they are making. As long as the housing market continues to decline in value, our economy will not significantly improve. Greece is a symptom of the problem, not the cause of the problem.
Senator, Midshipman, third class Temple, 27th Company again. Over here, sir. Sir, it seems that over the past couple of years, the average American has become somewhat embittered with the political process today. It seems as though there's somewhat of a gridlock in Congress when it comes to decision making. Do you ever feel like, as a senator, you have to sacrifice your own personal values or infringe upon your own personal agendas and what you want to do in Congress to sort of push things such as getting elected again or making any sort of progress in Congress? Do you ever have that dilemma?
Well, thank you. First of all, you're very kind in your comments about the status of the Congress with the American people. I appreciate that. Our approval rating is now around, the last poll I saw was about 11%. So we're down to paid staffers and blood relatives. I landed at Reagan National Airport the other day, and a guy ran up to me and said, "Hey," he said, "anybody ever tell you you look a lot like Senator John McCain?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Doesn't it sometimes just make you mad as hell?" So yes, there is significant disapproval, and most of it, or all of it, is well-deserved because we are not doing the job that the American people sent us there to do. And it has changed over the years that I have been a member of Congress for the worse. The American people expect us to sit down and work things out together. But the American electorate many times elects people and re-elects them because they take very rigid positions on both right and left. And sometimes they punish the elected representative who does reach across the aisle, who does try to reach a compromise. I've never had any difficulty. Oh yeah, I have. I've never, sometimes I have agonized, but because of my life, I have not ever done something that I thought was purely for political expediency. I take that back. When I was running for president in 2000 against then Governor George Bush in South Carolina, the issue was the Confederate flag. And some people wanted the Confederate flag taken down from the capital of South Carolina. Others wanted it kept up. It was a very divisive issue in South Carolina. So when I was, and it was a very tight race at that time between myself and then Governor Bush, President Bush. And they came and asked me, said, "What do you think about the Confederate flag?" And I said, "Well, it's up to the state of South Carolina to decide." That was an act of cowardice, and because I knew that the Confederate flag should not be flying over the state capital of the state of South Carolina. And that was after the election was over, I went back down to South Carolina and I apologized, but that did not change the fact that I was a coward in not saying what we all know, and that is the Confederate flag should not fly over any state capital. The American flag is the flag that should fly over every nation's capital. And so I am not without error, but most of the time I am confident enough in my own judgment because of my own experience and a lot of the things that I learned right here about honor that has made things a lot easier for me in life to make those decisions. Yes, sir?
Senator Markey, fourth class Lovejoy from the 18th Company. Recently in the news, the Supreme Court is looking at the issue revolving around universal health care that Congress passed and President Obama signed. What is your opinion on it? Is it constitutional or unconstitutional, sir?
I've always believed that it was unconstitutional, and here's why. I believe that the Commerce Clause of the Constitution of the United States that said everything not enunciated in the Constitution is thereby reserved to the states. I think the states should be making those decisions. I also don't think it's constitutional for our government, our national government, to say that you have to buy a product describe what's in that product, and pay a penalty if you don't. That, in my view, deprives us of our fundamental constitutional rights. The vote's going to be 5-4, my friends, one way or the other, and the debate will go on. We fought very hard against Obamacare, and I'd be glad to tell you about why we did and what has happened since, but I can tell you this: the cost of health care has not gone down, and that was the promise of Obamacare. And I can also tell you that there is nothing in it about medical malpractice, which accounts for sometimes 20 to 30% increase in health care costs. But most importantly, it is a massive takeover of about 1/5 of our gross national product, which is health care, by the federal government. And I think that there is other ways to do it. But we will know in June, and they finished their deliberations today. And you have no doubt, my friends, it'll be 5-4, whether it is declared unconstitutional or not. What we would like to do, we Republicans, if it is declared unconstitutional, start over from the beginning. We know that the problem with health care in America is not the quality of health care. The highest quality of health care in America, in the world, is the United States of America. But the costs and the inflation are so high that there's no way that programs such as Medicare can survive, nor can we afford the double-digit inflation that continues to characterize health care in America. Thank you for the question.
Thank you, sir.
Very interesting.
Sir, Midshipman First Class Costello, 24th Company. As Western liberalism increasingly takes hold across the world, to what extent do you see our global leadership becoming more or less multilateral?
I think it should be multilateral. I think there are other countries that share our values. But I also think that there's one thing about being multilateral, and there's another thing about not leading. There is no nation in the world capable of leading. And in Libya, we didn't lead. But in Bosnia, we led. In Kosovo, we led. And throughout the 20th century, and I hope throughout the 21st century, we will lead, but not unilaterally. Because there are nations that share our values and share our principles, but the indispensable nation still remains the United States of America. And when I visit Tripoli, and when I visit Tunisia, and when I visit these other countries, it's always us that they look to. It's always the United States that they look to for inspiration and as role models. As flawed as we are, and we admit our flaws and our shortcomings, a lot of nations don't, that we still must lead, but we can do it, I think, in a multilateral fashion. Small example, there is now these Gulf countries that are awash in money that are ready to fund, for example, the Syrian National Army and provide them with weapons and equipment, just as they did the Transition National Council in Libya. So I think that we live in a multipolar, multinational world, but there still will remain for a long, long period of time one leader. And if you don't want America to lead, who do you want to lead? One more, go ahead.
Senator, this is Midshipman Second Class Lopez, First Company. Recently, there's been a Marine who has spoken out against the president publicly on Facebook. The UCMJ has guidelines about how to deal with service members in the political arena. How do you feel about service members who toe that line and potentially could say ill remarks about the Commander-in-Chief?
My friend, when we raise our hand and take the oath to support and defend the United States of America, you become part of a unique group, a small group of Americans who are ready to go out and do what's necessary to defend the nation. That's the way it's always been. And we give up certain privileges that ordinary citizens enjoy. And one of them, when you are a member of the military, your commander-in-chief is the President of the United States. You should not and cannot criticize the President of the United States in the way that this person has. It is just not appropriate, and I think that he deserves to be punished according to the Uniform Code of Military Justice. Can I just say it's great to be back, and congratulations in the victory over Army again. And I have no final words of wisdom except to say that one thing to keep in mind is that while you're working very, very hard, and while you are striving to succeed, and while you all want to become a six-striper, which is only one is chosen, but then I want you to also understand that you also should enjoy life. Enjoy your friends. The ones that you will know the best for the rest of your life are the ones you're sitting next to today. Enjoy. Enjoy having the privilege of serving this country in the United States Naval Academy. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm going to give you your gift here. Senator McCain, thank you for joining us this evening, and on behalf of the brigade, we all pitched in and bought you this little gift. It's a traditional Navy blue and gold jacket. We're gonna blue and gold. Please remain standing for the playing of Blue and Gold. Please stand by for the departure of the official party. Thank you. Dismissed.